What's up, y'all? Welcome back to the Mining Pod, brought to you by Cleanspark. Will is out today. He is at the Proto Event in Georgia. So you're stuck with Colin and Matt, but who doesn't love a little Colin and Matt one-on-one tete-a-tete? How you doing, Matt?
Ready to round up.
Let's do it, man. So we've got some interesting news items this week. We will be covering the Proto Rig launch that Will has been reporting on in Georgia. Proto, a subsidiary of Block, or I guess not really a subsidiary, it's specifically their mining rig manufacturing arm, just released their Bitcoin miner. Some interesting things to pick out there. It seems like the launch was pretty successful and the rig looks pretty sweet. So we'll be covering that as our hero story after the hash rate index update that we usually do. Then we will hop into another news item from today. Terra Wolf signing a 10-year, 200 megawatt hosting deal for its AI and HPC compute. Moving on to another story about Mara acquiring a majority stake in an HPC company. Interesting first move there for them in that realm. And then we will be going on to the Ethiopia mining ban that broke this week. And we will finish on a cry corner for Monero. Monero got 51% attacked, not quite 51% attacked. There's kind of some disagreement on the definitions there, but going to be an interesting one. We don't want to bash Monero too much. It's less of a cry corner and more of a like, oh, sorry about that, bro. But anyway, before we start, a word from our sponsors. You ever get into your buddy's car and think, dude, how do you live like this? There's half-eaten Taco Bell on the console, a pile of garbage and fast food cups and bags, rumbling in the trunk. You look behind you under your seat and you're pretty sure you saw something move, but you don't know what? Well, how do you think your Bitcoin miner feels if you're not keeping on top of your filtration game? Y'all need to get on Colorado Air Filters. Colorado Air Filters is a major supplier of air filtration systems for Bitcoin mining sites. And they're currently running a summer sale on their inventory, so now is the time to act. Whether you need HEPA filters, new shipments or installations for your containers or your large-scale mining facilities, retrofitted buildings, Colorado Air Filters has it all. And units are ready to sell now. Contact sales at coloradoairfilter.com and use the code MININGPOD to claim 15% off today. Again, that is sales at coloradoairfilter.com with code MININGPOD.
Hey, Will here with Blockspace Media. Did you know that we have individual feeds for all our shows? If you're watching the Mining Pod, Bitcoin Season 2, or the Court Show, be sure to check out the individual feeds. You can find them on your podcast player of choice, whether that be Spotify, Apple, YouTube, etc. Just type in Blockspace Media and you'll find all our shows pop up, or just type in the individual show name like the Mining Pod or Bitcoin Season 2. Be sure to hit that subscribe and give us a 5-star rating so we can continue to bring you the best content in Bitcoin.
Alrighty, let's hop on over to hash rate index brought to us by Luxor so we can look at some of the Bitcoin mining data that is front and center today. Matt, difficulty weatherman, what are we seeing in the difficulty forecast?
We are anticipating a small difficulty decrease, 1.76%, what hash rate index has right now. We are 41% of the way through the epoch, so expect this to move some, probably depending on what price does. Two things today, I think, moved price. So yesterday, at the time of recording, broke all-time high. It touched 124K, Colin. Really spicy, wowing number. But at the time of recording, now we're at 117.9K. And I think that's on the back of the PPI, not the CPI, the PPI. Other inflation numbers came out, did not meet expectations, not good for interest rate expectations, as well as Scott Bessent was on TV, Secretary Treasury, and basically said that we wouldn't be buying Bitcoin for the reserve. That was at least the tagline that all the news outlets are posting, even though he did signal that there was billions of already held assets. It was like negative news because he said he wouldn't be buying, but he kind of insinuated that the US government has like 150,000 Bitcoin ish. So I don't know. Interesting how we're taking news these days. Like if you threw that news item at someone in the Bitcoin space 5 years ago, I think, and then you told them price went down, I think they would probably be beside themselves. Anyway, back to the difficulty update. Hash price sitting at $57.89 per petahash second per day. Pretty standard as of late. Again, if you're looking at what's going on over the past year, you're probably pretty happy with that number. But if you go back, 3-4 years pre-halving and into the previous cycle, we're several multiples lower than where we were. Fee market's still very dry. Not much to comment on there. We're still looking out there, dreaming, hoping of that one Zeta hash figure. Colin, want to add some color here?
I think you covered most of it. You're right about the Zeta hash. We just keep undulating here with the hash rate. We're at about, we dropped down pretty low this week. We got down to 905 exahashes a second. We're currently at about 927 exahashes a second. I'm glad that you mentioned the Bassett news, because I do agree. It's like if this had been a few years ago, people would be losing their shit over it. But I think the market has largely digested this because we've known that the U.S. government has a stockpile. It's been talked about a lot. But I just thought the response to was it a CNBC interview? He was on some mainstream news program. He was responding to the reporter, and it was just really funny because it was like, yeah, we're not going to buy it, but if we seize it from American citizens, then we'll just hold on to it. It's like, we're going to build the Bitcoin treasury by theft, not by purchase. So kind of interesting to see the market sell off there. I didn't know about the inflation data as well. So that kind of explains the sell off. It's pretty brutal. I mean, we, fell from, like you said, that all-time high, 124,000, about 6K over the last 24 hours. But you have something to add?
Yeah, Will would be mad at us right now because this is not a price show. On the record, this is not a price show.
It's always
that I think will enter the headlines in the next couple of days is 13F filings are due. I believe today is the deadline. We already saw the Harvard Endowment has a position in BlackRock's Bitcoin ETF, over $100 million. Very small, and of this whole, the Harvard Endowment's like $50 billion, right? But they have now Bitcoin exposure, and pensions are like the hardest to hook as far as ETFs go, historically, theory wise. So, and I think so we'll get some more market things to talk about in the next couple of days.
Yeah, that's a good point. I had a good recording with Sam Callahan a while back about how much Bitcoin exposure there is behind the scenes for some of these institutions, like endowments in the Ivy Leagues and some of the pension funds like Wisconsin. So if y'all are interested in that topic, it's a little bit outdated at this point, but check it out. It's on our YouTube. We'll move right along, though, to, I would say, probably the biggest news this week, definitely in regard to the ASIC market landscape, but for Bitcoin mining in general, and that is Proto's new mining rig. So like I was saying earlier, Proto is a division of Block, Jack Dorsey's company, formerly known as Square. And they've been behind the scenes building this mining rig for a long time now. They've been very close to the chest about information on it. We didn't know the form factor. We didn't know anything about the specs. And they kind of laid it all bare today at this event in Georgia. So a few highlights from it. It's got swappable hashboards, and Proto claims as a result of this, you're going to see a 20% reduction in your overall cost in terms of having to buy new miners each cycle. I could be, it says save 20% per upgrade cycle. I'm not really sure what the numbers are on that because the most expensive part of the machine is the hashboards. But I do think that just the bottom line for that is the fact that you're not going to have to buy a new shoebox every time that you want to upgrade your hashboards. And I think that this is something that a lot of miners are going to love. It's one less thing to have to worry about. It's one less thing to spend money on. And it should be pretty easy. Swap those in and out. They can, just slide right out, put it into the shoebox. It's an air-cooled construct, but it can easily be immersed as far as I can tell from this image. And it's got a pretty competitive joules per terahash, assuming this is accurate. I'm always skeptical about the marketed figures. I want to actually see it plugged in and have a power reader on it. But they're advertising 14.1 joules per terahash, which is competitive with the S23. And if that stands, absolutely massive feat for their first mining rig, right? We saw Intel try to come in and disrupt the ASIC miner landscape in like 2022 with their block scale miner. And it was a generation behind when they had it out. They sunsetted the whole program because it just wasn't viable at all. So if those numbers stand up to scrutiny, pretty amazing achievement from the team there. And the last point that Will notes here, it's 800 terahashes. So it's not, it's a pretty sizable miner, right? They've got a lot of hashboards in there. I think I'm looking at this correct. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, eight hashboards in this thing. So people were probably looking at that 800 terahash number and thinking like, whoa, the S19 or the S23 is like what, like in the ballpark of like 300 something. And so, but you got to pay attention to the joules per terahash, obviously, because they're cramming a bunch of hashboards in this thing. But overall, pretty interesting launch. I'm very eager to see going forward how many public miners step up to purchase this thing. Core Scientific's got 15 exahashes on order. Big questions there as to what's going to happen to those machines, considering CoreWeave is currently undergoing an acquisition deal with them. It's not been approved yet, and they're still negotiating, so we'll see what happens there. But the other question is, how many of these are they going to be able to produce? I think that's the biggest question mark, because one of the other big killers for entrance to the ASIC manufacturing landscape, it's not just about getting the specs right on the chips and being competitive, but you have to be able to scale. Bitmain and MicroBT pump out tens of thousands of units per month. If you can't get up to that scale, you're not going to be as attractive to some of the large miners who need to be moving in size. Matt, any takes on this before we move on?
Yeah. If Michael Saylor is the hero that we prop up for pumping our bags, Jack Dorsey is the hero that we don't deserve. He has brought about a hardware wallet. He's got Cash App, a Lightning implementation. He was paying the legal fees for core developers when the Craig Wright thing was going on. And now he has brought us, it delivered, right? Delivered on, he did BitChat too, this Bluetooth thing the other day. Anyway, now he's brought about a US ASIC manufacturer, probably the most difficult of them all, in my opinion, Colin, thinking just historically about how much market share Bitmain and MicroBT have eaten up over time. Canaan too, but how many? There used to be a lot more ASIC manufacturers, right? But they basically consolidated over time. Many have tried in the US, not succeeded very much, and now he's come about, giving us a machine with decent specs. You already covered them. I don't need to get into it, but I hope, right, that we can have more diversification geopolitically on where ASIC manufacturers are coming from. They take some market share, and that this would be a really good thing, I think, from a decentralization standpoint in kind of the Bitcoin stack, if you will. So yeah, this is positive news for me, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it plays out.
Yeah, shout out to the GOAT. I think the only thing that would make this more impressive is if they revealed that they were actually manufacturing the rigs themselves. Obviously not the ASICs. They're getting those from TSMC. But if they were manufacturing the full shoebox rig in the US, that's the only thing that I think that would make this like a grand slam. And I'm glad you mentioned Jack. I just wanted to pull up this. This is a tweet from Blockspace co-founder Charlie Spears talking about Jack's involvement in funding Bitcoin development. This is from Digital Currency Initiative. I'm not sure what the timeline is for this. I'm not sure if this is all-time funding or if this is over a specific window. But Jack Dorsey has accounted for 90.5% of the 34.24 million to OpenSats, which typically goes to core contributors. There's another fund here that I'm not aware of called B Trust, 100% split between him and someone who I don't know. Is that Jay-Z? I can't quite tell who that is at the bottom. And then for Brink, he's 14.2% of the 14.1 million. And obviously Block, like you just said, they're just crushing with the with a lot of the development. And then he has undisclosed estimated $8 to $10 million worth of funding. So like the man is out here single-handedly funding core contributors. If no one else is stepping up to the plate to fund these things, you're happy that these core contributors and some of these developers are getting funding and that Jack is behind it. I mean, otherwise we don't have people who are economically motivated, not just motivated by the mission to improve Bitcoin, right? But we'll move on from that. We'll stop simping for Jack Dorsey And we'll move on to the story that you unfortunately have to take because it involves a name that I don't think either of us are totally sure how to pronounce. But that is Mara acquiring a majority stake in an HPC subsidiary. Matt, what is going on here? I thought Mara didn't want to do HPC stuff.
You conveniently did not name the subsidiary here, which I'm going to attempt and say it's Exaion. For $168 million here, dollar deal with the option to actually acquire more. That payment is equivalent to 64% stake Mara has taken, but they have the option to pay another $127 million to get to 75% stake. So Exaion is a subsidiary HPC provider of EDF, right? That's the deal there. And they have all these partners with kind of bold bracket names: NVIDIA, Deloitte, TCRSI, which I'm unfamiliar with, but seems bigger than you would suspect. So, different kind of government consulting, hardware supply chain type of relationships here that potentially make this interesting as well. It's like Mara has some global operations and ties, right? And this is kind of furthering, I guess, a footprint into the European side of things as well as the HPC market. Interesting story. I'll throw it over to you. I do think there are other stories to come that are more impactful. I'll say that. Foreshadowing.
The reason I wanted to zoom in on this one is because, and just a few more housekeeping items, they have 64% stake. They have the option to expand it to 75% through an additional investment of $127 million. That option is through 2027. The reason I chose this is because Mara has been very vocal on its earnings calls, and whenever they get lobbed a question about HPC and AI, that they're not really looking to compete in that market the way that other miners are. But what they have mentioned is that they would be interested in setting up shop on one of these AI data centers, specifically inference data centers, and deploying mining rigs to soak up any electricity that's not being used when inference use is down. So these AI data centers have to purchase, they have power purchasing agreements. They're allotted certain amounts of power. If that's not being monetized, they might lose out on some revenue. And they increase their costs when they're not actually producing anything, right? So I think roughly the idea is that you have Bitcoin miners on those sites. Bitcoin miners ramp up when inference is ramping down, and you can kind of balance accordingly. And I have no other information on this other than what I saw on the Miner Mag, but I wonder if this is part of that play. 64% is a huge stake. And the other thing that that Mara has talked about, and this fits in with this, considering it's the EDF, it's nationally owned by the French government. They've talked about wanting to partner with sovereigns more, right? They want to partner with nation states. We've already seen this in the UAE. It looks like this might be their next one that they are working on. They're trying to find ways to embed themselves with nation states because I think they feel like that gives them a competitive edge. They can be closer to the electricity supply with some of these nationally owned grids. The prices should be cheaper as a result. So not really anything huge right now, but I think this is going to be a story to watch to see just exactly how this relationship develops.
We are Cleanspark, America's Bitcoin miner, a publicly traded company with the largest operating hash rate, powered entirely by self-operated infrastructure across 4 states. This is our proof of work. We are setting the standard for what's next. Learn more about the intersection of energy and Bitcoin at cleanspark.com.
But we'll move on to the next story, which is also HPC and AI related. A big one that dropped today from Terawulf. Terawulf signs 10-year, 200 megawatt hosting deal. Google takes 8% stake. So I'm reading directly from the Blockspace website here, and I quote, Terawulf announced that it has signed 2 10-year HPC co-location agreements with AI cloud platform Fluidstack, securing more than 200 megawatts of critical IT load at its Lake Mariner campus in Western New York. The agreement totals $3.7 billion in contracted revenue and included 2 5-year extension options that could lift total revenue to $8.7 billion. To support the build-out, Google will backstop $1.8 billion of Fluidstack's lease obligations tied to project financing and will receive warrants for $41 million Terra Wolf shares or 8% pro forma equity. Phase 1 of the deployment, about 40 megawatts, is expected to be online in the first half of 2026. With the full 200 megawatts targeted by year-end 2026. This was a huge one, I think, just with regards to right now, Terawulf's got like, I think 72.5 megawatts contracted out for Core 42 in Lake Mariner. This is the facility that they were retrofitting for AI and HPC. But obviously the big tagline here was Google, right? I mean, the fact that Google is backstopping part of this investment and they're also taking a stake in Terawulf 8% is pretty big. And that's the first time we've seen one of the Mag 7, I think. I could be wrong about this, but this is the first time I'm seeing a Mag 7 company take a direct stake in one of these Bitcoin miners who's looking at an AI and HPC pivot. And I think for anyone who's been bullish on Terawulf, this has to be absolutely, vindicating, because Terawulf has been lagging in recent years. Their hash rate started, because it's slowing down. They had to sell their stake in the Nautilus facility that they had with Susquehanna in Pennsylvania. We're at the Susquehanna facility, a nuclear facility in Pennsylvania. And they've kind of been puttering around and stagnating a little bit, but they've obviously been behind the scenes working really hard. And now we're seeing the fruits of that. I'm just going to pull up the Terawulf stock price really quickly because it absolutely surged on the day. Last I checked, it was up like 42%. Yeah, it's up 37.27% today. You can just see it going absolutely vertical. It hit a high of 787 USD, which is not quite an all-time high for them, but over the last year or so, that's getting close to their all-time high set last November. Just another day, another HPC AI deal that is turning the market around for some of these Bitcoin miners, right? And so far, it seems like Terawulf is leading the pack, no pun intended, with some of the newer AI and HPC pivot miners. Obviously, Core Scientific's got the CoreWeave acquisition undergoing, but so far, Terawulf is the only major one that has announced tenants, right? And right now we have Bitfarms doing their retrofit. They're working on securing that anchor tenant. Same with Cypher Mining. So Terawulf kind of separating out here.
I think this Terawulf news piece is huge. This is what a lot of these companies are kind of after, right? Kind of infrastructural landlord model. They got on the hook a contract, multi-billion-dollar at a site for the next several years, with the possible of an extension with huge money while limiting counterparty risk because Google would be on the hook should, what's the company? Fluidstack, I think, the name, which I'm unfamiliar with, but should they not be able to deliver, right? And then in return, Google gets some equity. Market reaction huge. I think that this is kind of the golden goose that I think a lot of these companies that are dipping their toe into the HPC space are looking for. So I guess kudos to Terawulf.
All right, we will move on to the next story. This one came out of nowhere, especially considering we got, pitched this article a while back at Blockspace talking about how the EEP, which is Ethiopia's power authority, had pulled in like $200 million worth of revenue from Bitcoin miners in 2025. But they might totally pivot away from that. Matt, what's going on in Ethiopia?
Yeah, they're done with Bitcoin mining. That's what's going on. They're phasing it out. Their electricity reliability, right, within the country, isn't necessarily, I think, where they want it to be. And there was a lot of load going into Bitcoin mining. Are they timing the market? Would be my question. Are they selling the top? Is kind of a fun question to pitter patter around with. But I mean, this it's an example of jurisdictional risk if you are an operator where you're setting up your operations. We saw this with Kazakhstan a couple years ago, post China mining ban, right? And of course, with the China mining ban, we saw it there too. This directly affects some publicly listed companies because were anticipated plans to expand in Ethiopia. If you'll scroll down a little bit, I believe it's BitDeer, Canaan, Phoenix Group, BitFuFu, and BitMining is what the Miner Mag has cited here in the article. But Ethiopia started as a kind of a mini hub in 2023, and this is the result is now, at least what we can glean, is that they're shutting things down as of now in 2025.
Yeah, what's interesting about this is I actually messaged some sources in Ethiopia to ask them about this, and one of them said, I'm quoting here, EEP, that's Ethiopia Electric Power, isn't just halting new crypto mining permits, it's signaling the end for current operators too, with license renewals now in doubt. So part of this article, my biggest question was, it said that they're not going to allow any new license and they would gradually phase out older ones. I'm curious what that process looks like and if they'll actually go the full 9 yards and just kick all of them out eventually. But what's interesting about this to me is you didn't really see those companies react, or the stock prices for those companies react too much. I mean, BitFuFu has a huge Ethiopian mining presence and it's not down on the week, it's actually up. This news broke on the 11th and their stock didn't react at all. Same thing with BitDeer right here. So I don't know if investors are hoping that those grandfather clauses will be sticky and that some of these larger public miners will be able to operate with impunity in the region. But to me, it seems like, at least from what I talked with my sources, it's like this is eventually going to be a complete and all-out ban. So I think still some question marks surrounding it, no telling where it'll go, but you hit the nail on the head, Matt. This is why miners talk about, jurisdictional risk. This is why Bitfarms was itching to get out of Paraguay. Not saying Paraguay is exactly like Ethiopia, but they were getting comments from investors a lot saying, well, why are you building there? We can't price in risk for that market. We know nothing about the geopolitical, or we know nothing about the socio-political landscape over there. Just build in the US. And so they sold their farm to Hive. And similar with here, I think this is part of the reason why some of those companies like BitFuFu are significantly underpriced in terms of the hash rate they have under management, because investors don't want to have to deal with shocks like this, right? And they do happen more often than not, especially in these countries with cheap power that aren't as developed maybe as some of the mining hubs that we're used to. All right, for this week's Cry Corner, y'all probably saw this, but Cubic, a Monero mining pool, that's not the language used, but that's my understanding, claims majority control of Monero hash rate, raising 51% attack fears. So earlier this week, this company Cubic, which is led by former IOTA co-founder Sergey, this is payback, Even Cheglo, claims to have controlled over 51% of Monero's hash rate, potentially enabling it to reorganize blocks, censor transactions, and attempt double spins. And my understanding with this, so the IOTA co-founder, and by the way, shout out to anyone out there who remembers IOTA, the DAG days with all of these wacky new consensus mechanisms that never ended up doing anything. But so apparently he's saying this was to stress test Monero. And, it's kind of like, I'm doing a public service to see if this is even possible. But apparently they were paying Monero miners and incentives. Like they were basically offering them more for their hash rate than they could conceivably earn from other pools or from self-mining to aggregate their hash rate. And then they ended up reorganizing blocks and attacking the network. There was a little bit of contention on Twitter about whether or not this is technically a 51% attack. I don't think they actually got to that threshold, and they never ended up double spending. But I think 51% of attack is more like a vibes definition. It's describing a scenario in which a miner ends up accruing enough hash rate to do meaningful damage to the network. In theory, you don't actually need 51% to do some of these things that they did. 33% to 50% could be enough. And as long as you have enough hash rate to win successive blocks, then you can reorg and you can orphan blocks that are on the chain that you don't want to be canonical, right? So far, in terms of damage to Monero, Monero's down about 8.6% in the past 5 days. and 18% in the past month. The reputational damage from something like this is pretty staggering. There are two other things I want to note. One, there was I think one of Ledger CTO or one of Ledger's C-suites was tweeting about this, and he said that it would cost like $75 million to attack Monero per day. I don't think that's true. That seems way overblown to me. I saw some other figures. I didn't run them myself that said it was more like in like the $100,000 range, which is still expensive, but that's not crazy when you consider what you can do with one of these attacks, right? And that's not really that much money in the grand scheme of things to some of these crypto folks. The other thing too is this comes at a wild time. We just last week got the Tornado Cash guilty verdict for Roman Storm. He was not convicted of money laundering or violation of sanctions, but he was convicted of operating an unlicensed money transmitter business. And that also came on the heels of the Samurai Wallet devs striking a plea deal for the same thing, saying that they operated an unlicensed money transmitter business. So you kind of have like the three horsemen. It always comes in threes. Or maybe if it's three horsemen, we're waiting for the fourth here. But, we have Samurai devs taking the plea deal. You have Roman Storm getting convicted. Now you have Monero, really the chief privacy coin, getting 51% attacked. That doesn't do anything to de-anonymize the transactions on Monero, but it does harm the network and inflict some pretty grave reputational risk.
I would say it's concerning that someone has a hash rate concentration that high, but it doesn't actually seem like anything bad happened. So what is it here that's happening under the hood, right? Is basically if someone amasses a certain amount of hash rate, they could privately mine a longer chain and then reorg the canonical chain, right? And then they would essentially have the longer, most accumulated proof of work upon the merge, and people, by definition, will choose that chain, right? And really, I think there's just selfish mining tactics here where they do that and then they extract more rewards via the reorg after the fact. But I don't believe they're actually censoring transactions or trying to commit a double spend, which that is, of course, more malicious behavior, right? Some kind of empty block attack, or, of course, committing a double spend is almost like a poison pill that people are very fearful of potentially happening. Hurts the integrity of the system. But it's kind of these sorts of things, I think, are educational events. I feel like for the cycled newcomers that come into the Bitcoin community every couple years. We talk a lot about markets and ETFs and regulatory developments, right? But some technical foundations of how the systems work, I feel like a lot of people don't actually approach until something like this comes up, and then you can talk about it and you can actually learn this is what happens. This is how we would come to consensus in this type of situation. This is what power miners actually have in the system. So while sorry, Monero folks, it really isn't that big of a deal right now. I do kind of think that this is almost a good thing for the Bitcoin community. Lastly, you mentioned IOTA. Whatever happened to the Internet of Things? We don't talk about Internet of Things anymore.
No, we don't.
It's all AI these days. Whatever. They were going to build smart cities. I feel like I've been gypped. I want a smart city. I think they were signing plans with different mayors, I think, back in the day. So this is like 7 years ago, probably at this point.
Oh, it was for sure. We've got kind of a twofer here for the Cry Corner. So this is IOTA, and to zoom in on what Matt was saying, the concept of this was that in the future you're going to have all of these smart devices, and those smart devices are going to need to make payments to each other. Your dishwasher is going to have to pay your refrigerator for the excess electricity that it's using to wash your dishes or some BS. I don't know. But the idea was that you were going to have this currency that would allow machines to make payments to each other. And it had this this consensus algorithm or a mechanism called DAG, which is stands for I can't even remember. It's something I'm not even going to try to pronounce it. But anyway, this chart shows you just how dumb 2017 and 2018 were. So like in 2017 and 2018, all of these new cryptocurrencies and ICOs were popping up with all of these wild edge cases. And IOTA was at one point, I think, like almost in the top 10, if not in the top 10 of cryptocurrencies in terms of market value. And you can see it kind of the blow off top here in 2017. It reached a peak price of $5.37. But now it's just, there's nothing going on, right? Its market cap is still almost $1 billion, which is insane to me. But as far as I'm concerned, the project is totally dead. And you're right. AI is, that's the new hype. No one cares about Internet of Things because no one wants smart devices. Like, I don't want to talk to my fridge and have it give me the weather. I don't need my dishwasher to be connected to the internet.
I feel like promises were unkept. I'm upset. We have AI and we have self-driving cars, but our cities aren't smart. And so frankly, this has ruined my day.
Down bad. All right, well, we'll leave it there. Thank you all for tuning in. Hope everyone has a good weekend. We've got a lot of content coming out this week for the mining pod. We are going to be, I think, double publishing some shows this week. We will have one on the Proto mining rig, so be on the lookout for that. We've also got one coming out on Cleanspark's leadership change if y'all have any questions about that. So tune in and have a beautiful weekend, and we'll see y'all next week.